any exit from the war invalidates the U.S. partnership with Israel against Iran. That is to say, no future president is going to do what Donald Trump did. But at the moment, what we have is a memorandum of understanding, apparently a one-page document, which is not a peace, not an agreement, but it's an agreement to negotiate. And we have the ironic statement from Donald Trump, who went to war with no negotiations and used diplomacy as a cover for a surprise attack, that, we have to exhaust diplomatic means before we resort to force. I guess he learned something from the first round where he didn't apply diplomacy at all. It looks like Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner have been removed from the process, which is now being run by professional diplomats and leaders from Pakistan and Qatar, who are attempting to mediate this. The immediate reaction to Donald Trump's statement that we're close to an agreement, which seems to be a characteristic overstatement on his part. There's been some progress evidently made in some areas. But the immediate reaction from Israel was, oh no, great headlines, about Trump selling out Israel and so forth and so on. The Israelis are in an election mode, so that they're a bit subdued in their criticism of Trump, because, of course, he could turn around and do to them what he's done to everyone who's crossed him in the United States or in Europe or elsewhere, namely try to trash their reputation. People who are running for office don't like that, so they've held their fire a bit. That is, I think they've been quite tough. Netanyahu has been quite forceful in private on telephone conversations with Donald Trump, but he's not publicly lambasted him. On the other hand, Israel's faithful stooges in the United States, people like Lindsey Graham and so on, Ted Cruz and others, have pulled out all the stops. This is a sellout. We need to, go back to war, finish the job, and so forth and so on. The problem for Donald Trump is he's basically cornered. On the one hand, he has Netanyahu putting pressure on him. His Jewish donors, Israeli donors, Miriam Adelson is an Israeli, $250 million donation is not trivial. They're both ganging up on him. Part of his own Republican base is in rebellion. And his military are telling him, you can't, there's no real military option. We can't hope to succeed. And they may even have asked him to give them an order in writing, which is what the military do when they're being asked to do something they know is infeasible and want to be able to levy blame on whoever it was that issued the order. I want that order in writing. Is a characteristic response in those circumstances. The other possibility, of course, is that this thing just sort of peters out and it goes on and so on. But the elements of the alleged deal, which is not a deal but a framework for negotiating deals on the key issues, the essence of it is essentially that the Strait of Hormuz will be open. Of course, it is open if you do a deal with Iran. I'm not quite sure what that means. It's claimed that there would be no tolls levied. I don't believe that for a minute, that Iran has agreed to that. It's very clear that Iran is demanding sanctions relief and release of the frozen funds that number in the tens of billions of dollars that it has been deprived of. It's also very clear that Iran is not going to do anything unless it gets something first. Iran has no confidence at all in the United States, having walked away from the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear deal, in Trump's first term, having watched the United States renege on various commitments in negotiations with Witkoff and Kushner, having seen the United States repudiate treaties with others, and of course, I think Iran will demand payment up front before it does anything. And that's going to be very hard. So this is, as I said once before on your program, this is Zugzwang. This is a mobilization. Anything Trump does causes him defeat, and the United States defeat. This is a ridiculous situation to have gotten into. So basically, Iran is not going to release the enriched uranium to any third party, certainly not the United States, by order of the new Supreme Leader, Mustafa Khamenei. It is not going to give up control of the Strait of Hormuz. It is not going to make compromises to appease the United States. It has achieved escalation dominance, in effect, with the Israelis. And it's demanding that any deal include a real, as opposed to a phony, ceasefire in Lebanon, which brings me to the final point. If there actually is a deal, Israel is in a perfect position to sabotage it, and will do so. As usual, Glenn, when we talk about these subjects, it's all gloom and doom that comes to mind. There's no pot of gold at the end of this rainbow that I can see.
Yeah, well, as you said, there's no good options left. And I think this is the problem for Trump. That is, if he goes back to fighting Iran, then there's limits for how long he can fight. It's unclear if he will be able to get a ceasefire once he's out of ammunition, and so also can't win on the battlefield. But if he pursues peace, then the Iranians do not want to go back to the old status quo, so they will make sure that they hold on to the Strait of Hormuz to make sure, create incentives for countries not to host bases or put sanctions. But so you can't do one, can't do the other, but also just waiting is also not ideal, because the global economy is tanking. So one has to end the current, not ceasefires.
Well,
yep.
Let me make a point here, and that is that Trump and his administration are paying a price in domestic politics for having misdescribed reality. That is to say, they have been claiming levels of victory over Iran which are utterly implausible and which don't hold up to scrutiny. And for example, on the question of going back to war, the United States is busily deferring or canceling contracts to supply all sorts of equipment to allies and protected states. The $14 billion deal with Taiwan, which Trump has yet formally to decide, can't happen because there's no equipment to be provided. Some of the Baltic states have been informed that they will not get the weapons they paid for on the schedule they imagined. The same is true, obviously, of others. Equipment has been moved out of Japan and South Korea. The administration's been bravely putting on a show claiming that there was no depletion of weaponry or defensive capability as a result of this ridiculous war. But the facts are they're behaving entirely in conformity with the fact that it did happen. So, you can listen to them or you can watch what they're doing. And I think it's more instructive to watch what they're doing. They're in a box, and the summer driving season is upon us in the United States. This is the time when people take vacations and move around, and the price of gasoline is $4.55 or so nationally now. The price of oil just went down again. Oil traders, it turns out, are terminally stupid and keep falling for the same absurd tricks of market manipulation. So Brent went down substantially, but that won't hold, and it certainly won't be benefit if kinetic action against Iran is stepped up. And there's another point here, and that is militarily. It's not just that we've depleted our capabilities and we're causing a great deal of operational wear and tear on our forces, but Iran has used the 6 weeks of the effective truce to reconstitute its armed forces. And the intelligence community has totally contradicted the administration's claims of the levels of damage done to Iran's inventory of missiles. Iran is back producing drones in high volume. It may even be getting some drones from the Russians, although the Russians are using their own drones against Ukraine pretty forcefully. So, there's just nothing here that justifies any optimism, really.
No, sadly, I wish there was some more reason for optimism. But you mentioned before that Israel would likely seek to sabotage if Trump will go down the path of peace, that is to find an agreement with Iran. But how far can the Israelis themselves take this, though? Because there seems to be a growing crisis of the ethos of Israel. Well, what is the country? What does it stand for? And this is usually a problem one sees with empires as well. That is, violence abroad, it tends to change the society at home. You see power always replacing principles. Citizens might become too disconnected from the world. Freedoms at home decline. So how do you see, how sustainable is this for Israel? Because they do have not just the economic problem and overstretched military, but you hear also more about very deep divisions at home, to the point where even some journalists in Israel are talking about the prospect of a civil war. I don't think they're quite there yet, but things are not going well.
Well, I think, of course, the key to everything is the American logistical support for Israel and political backing of Israel, which allows Israel to behave not just with impunity, but with wild abandon, really. It creates moral hazard for Israel. And Israel has fallen into that trap. But the Israeli aim in Lebanon remains effective annexation. They're talking about a buffer zone, but really what they're talking about is turning southern Lebanon into the equivalent of Gaza. And they can do that as long as the United States continues to supply them with weapons. And Trump has apparently assured them that we will. So how that fits into the proposed understanding with Iran is most unclear. Iran is not going to abandon Lebanon. It also has a sense of honor, which is at stake. So there's that. And as if this weren't enough, actually Israel is being badly hurt in Lebanon. Hezbollah apparently has optical fiber-guided drones, which are very effective. And it's actually losing a fair number of soldiers and a lot of equipment. And it's been beaten by Hezbollah before. The talks with the Lebanese government are a sideshow. The Lebanese government has no authority to end the war for Hezbollah. Hezbollah has denounced the negotiations. And so this is a sideshow, a farce, staged for performative effect. But as if this weren't enough, and all the problems you mentioned, declining economy, reservists who are fatigued and affected with post-traumatic stress disorder, and a military that is not doing well in Lebanon, chief of the armed forces who says that the Israeli Defense Forces are in danger of falling apart, the imminence of elections in a context where Netanyahu is very unpopular among many Israelis. As if this weren't enough, you have Ben-Gvir dramatizing the sadism of the Israeli populace, his own sadism, and Israel's sadism, with the flotilla and the people seized from the flotilla. That has cost Israel a huge amount, not just in the United States, where only 6% of Democrats now have a positive view of Israel, and nobody below the age of 50 has a positive view of Israel now in the United States. And there's the only people who do are so-called boomer Republicans, that is, Republicans born right after World War II in the baby boom, and they're dying. Well, I'm actually not a boomer. I'm older than they are. I'm not dead yet, but it's coming, So 15 years from now, they're not going to be around to support Israel. So maybe even shorter. But Europeans are finally beginning to react to the rape and humiliation, the beating of their own citizens in this flotilla. Some of the accounts are really quite hair-raising. And so Ben-Gvir is not an aberration. He is a representation of Israeli behavior today, however much the Israelis may choose to ignore it or deny it. And so Israel is rapidly losing its support base abroad. It is essentially a pariah internationally. And, the United States still backs it, and we've just seen the United States force Riyad Mansour, the Palestinian representative at the United Nations, to withdraw from his campaign to become the deputy leader of the General Assembly. He's withdrawn under our pressure on behalf of Israel. But diminishing returns are setting in for Israel. And, in the end, to go back to the irony of Donald Trump extolling the virtues of diplomacy when he has not shown any aptitude for it or even any inclination to use it, Israel has to make a strategic choice. Is it prepared to have everyone in the region and the world against it? Does it think it can survive when it's ostracized in the region it inhabits and not welcome elsewhere? Or is it prepared to try diplomacy for a change? The fact is that in 78 years, Israel has never put forward a single peace proposal, proposal for peaceful coexistence with the Palestinians or anyone else. This is a record of belligerence that is unmatched in human history. And so Israelis have to make a choice, and they don't seem to be inclined to do so. And I think as long as the United States continues to write blank checks to Israel and back it without any conditions, Israelis will not make a choice. And the state of Israel will not survive the conditions it's creating for itself. It will, like the two Christian Crusader kingdoms in the Middle Ages, the late Middle Ages, it will lose its foreign support and it will collapse. So, I think I find it very, very difficult to understand how anyone who cares about Israel could support the course of action that Israel and the United States have adopted, because I think it's ultimately fatal to the state of Israel.